What's up? It's EasyJ. Today we're doing a deck profile of my Skull Servants deck. Really fun deck. I love it. There are a couple cards that I'm missing, but overall super fun. So the first monster in the deck is going to be King of the Skull Servant. I do only have two. Normally you want to run three, but the way that this card works is its attack is 1,000 times every Skull Servant or King of the Skull Servant in your graveyard. Plus it has a second effect where if it is destroyed by battle, you can banish one of those King of the Skull Servants or Skull Servants from your graveyard to special summon it. The next card are your three vanilla Skull Servant cards. You wouldn't think that they're very vital in the deck, but they really are, and I'll show you why. One of the next cards is going to be White Baking. You want to run three of those. There we go. You want to run three of those. So basically how this card works, you pitch it to the graveyard, and you can add two monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, except White Baking, but they do have to either be Skull Servant or specifically list Skull Servant in the text, and then you discard one of those cards to the graveyard. That effect you can only use once per turn, but it does have another effect where if a level 3 or lower zombie monster, aka your King of the Skull Servant, would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can discard this card instead. So really great card. Definitely 3 White Baking. 3 White Prince. And most of the time, unless you already have one in your hand, that's going to be one of the 2 cards from White Baking that you want to add. So, and it's going to be the one that you want to discard. So when you discard it to the graveyard, you can send 1 Skull Servant and 1 Lady in White from your hand and or deck to the graveyard. So it gets 2 more monsters in the graveyard, upping your King of the Skull Servant. Plus it has a graveyard effect where you can banish 2 Skull Servants and this card and special summon 1 King of the Skull Servant from your deck. So definitely a good card to have in the deck. You want to run 3 of those. Next, 3 White Princess. So you can use White Princess a couple different ways. The way that I use it is I keep it in the hand and I use its effect where you discard it from your hand, and every monster currently on the field loses attack and defense equal to their own level / rank times 300. But there is another effect where if the card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 White Prince from your deck to your graveyard. I think that the other effect is a lot more useful, especially when you have very high level monsters that you just need to swing over with your King of the Skull Servant. Next, 3 Lady in White. This card is basically like the Skull Servants, where you just kind of get rid of them, send them to the graveyard. That being said, you can place it on the field, and if you do place it on the field, face up level 3 or lower zombie monsters, except Lady in White, cannot be destroyed by battle. Also, they are unaffected by spell and trap cards and effects. So it does have a couple different uses, but I usually just end up pitching her to the graveyard. Next, 3 White Mare. So with White Mare, couple different ways you can use it. Okay, you use it from the hand. One of its effects is you target 1 banished Skull Servant or White Mare and you return it to the graveyard. that'll give your King of the Skull Servant an additional 2,000 attack because you're sending the white mare and you're bringing one back in. Or you can target one of your banished Lady in Whites or King of the Skull Servants and special summon it to the field. So if your King of the Skull Servants are banished, you can send it from banished to the field. So there's a couple different ways to use White Mare. I run 2 Mizuki. So with Mizuki, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 zombie monster in your graveyard and special summon that target. So, like, let's say you have a King of the Skull Servant or a Lady in White, and you want to bring it back to the field. All you have to do, banish that from your graveyard, and you can bring it back. And for the last couple monsters here, we have Una Zombie, which has 2 very useful effects, one of them being you discard 1 card, and the other one being that monsters you control cannot attack for the rest of the field except zombie monsters. You can send 1 zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard. So, and you can activate both of those effects once per turn. So you can send your White Baking or your White Prince from deck to graveyard, or if you have them in hand, you can also discard from your hand to graveyard. So very, very useful card. I do only run 2 of those. And then last monster is 1 Jackalbalin. So with that one, you can discard 1 zombie monster. Special summon this card from your hand. During your opponent's main phase, you can activate a quick effect where you can target 1 zombie monster in either graveyard and special summon that monster, but banish it when it leaves the field. Then banish this face-up card until the end phase. So it's good for just getting a card out and sending something to the graveyard that you need in the graveyard. Now we are on to the spells. We don't run any traps in this deck, so unfortunately no traps, but first one, 3 Twin Twisters. Everyone knows how Twin Twister works. You discard 1 card and then target up to 2 spell or traps on the field and destroy them. So not only can you destroy a couple back row cards, but you can also discard one of your cards from your hand that you need, like White Baking or White Prince. Then I do 3 Allure of Darkness. Basically with Allure of Darkness, you draw 2 cards, and then you banish 1 dark monster from your hand. Or if you don't have any dark monsters in your hand, you just send the entire hand to the graveyard. So either way, it could work. If you have a King of the Skull Servant and a White Mare in your hand, and you have to banish one, you can banish the King of the Skull Servant, you can activate your White Mare's effect, send it to the graveyard, and special summon King of the Skull Servant to the field. Then, all the rest are going to be one-ofs. Monster Reborn, Upstart Goblin, draw 1 card and your opponent gains 1,000 life points. Foolish Burial, send 1 monster from your deck to graveyard, you know, whether it's White Baking or White Prince. Raigeki, to destroy all the monsters in their field. Card Destruction, to pitch all your cards to the graveyard. Swords of Revealing Light, which I just kind of have in there right now as a filler, but it does help on occasion. 1 for 1, you send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard, special summon 1 level 1 monster from your hand or deck, usually being your King of the Skull Servant. And 1 Burial from a Different Dimension, which you target up to 3 banished monsters and can return them to your graveyard, potentially giving your King of the Skull Servant an additional 3,000 attack. And for my final card, I do have 1 Forbidden Droplet. I do want to get 3 a full playset in there, but for right now, I do only have one. This card takes this deck to the next level. So how it works, you send any number of other cards from your hand and or field to the graveyard, so you can pitch cards to the graveyard. Then you choose that many effect monsters that your opponent controls, which nowadays in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be pretty much every monster. And until the end of this turn, their attack is not only halved, but also their effects are negated. So definitely extremely helpful. Plus, in response to this card's activation, your opponent cannot activate cards or the effects of cards with the same original type. So if you send a monster and a spell, they cannot activate any monster effects. They cannot activate any spells to stop this card. As the cards sent to their graveyard. So like I said, if you send a monster, a spell, or a trap, they cannot activate any monster, spell, or trap effects. But you can only use one once per turn. Now, I don't normally use my extra deck very much in this deck, but it can come in handy. So I do run 2 Relinquish Anima for those monsters where they summon it in front of the arrow and you just need to get them out of the way. They could be either extremely strong or just have effects that are limiting your possibilities. So you can link summon that out, take that monster. You don't have to worry about it anymore. 1 Link Karibo. Usually the way I do Link Karibo, if I need to pitch a card to the graveyard, I'll summon out that card, and then I will link summon into Link Karibo just to get him to the graveyard. Plus he does have his tribute effect where you take no damage. And those are the only extra deck monsters that I do run. I do have 1 Salamangreat Great Almirage, although I don't normally run him. I usually just keep him in my side deck. Just another Link one that I can quick get out. So I'll just run through a quick example here for you. Let's say you... how do I want to show you here? Okay, let's say you have 1 for 1. So you play 1 for 1. You send your White Baking to the graveyard, and you can special summon out your King of the Skull Servant. So now he's at 1000 attack. Your White Baking effect activates, you add 2 cards to your hand. So let's say you add a White Prince and a, let's say a White Princess. Now, you have to discard 1. You send the White Prince to the graveyard, which his effect activates. You send 1 Lady in White, and you send 1 Skull Servant. Now, you have that White Princess still. So you pitch that White Princess, her effect activates. He is now at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000, minus the 300 from her effect. So he is now at 47,000 in that 1 combo. Now, let's say your opponent activates effect sometime later on in the game, right? And let's say you have these 3 cards in your hand: Forbidden Droplet, White Mare, and Twin Twister. Actually, let's not do White Mare. Let's say White Baking, right? So let's say you have these 3 in your hand. You play Forbidden Droplet. You pitch White Baking and Twin Twister. So now you negate their effects, and you activate the effect of your or sorry, your White Baking. So, oh, and their attack is halved. So now your White Baking is active. So let's say you add another White Prince and White Princess. And you send, oh, sorry. There we go. And you send the White Prince. Now his effect activates. You send the Lady in White, and you send the Skull Servant. Now you pitch your White Princess again, and your King of the Skull Servant is now at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 minus the 300 for her effect, so 9,700. You can see why I love this deck. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. I will definitely put out another video once I get the other cards that I need. But for now, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much.